Hello, everyone. Welcome to our video on camera arts and photography. We're going to kind of just jump around a little bit with the images that we're going to look at. So what we're looking at first off, this is the first, one of the first photographs of a snowflake ever taken. And it was made by a fellow named Wilson Snowflake Bentley. He lived in Vermont, and to be able to capture these images in the late 1800s, when photography is still very, very new, um, he ended up, the way that he achieved this was by attaching a microscope lens to his camera lens. And he had this little teeny tiny black background. And as you can imagine, he had to do this outside because snowflakes melt, as we know. Um, and he attached the microscope to his camera lens and took these photographs. He would use a feather, it said, to very gently move the snowflakes onto this little black surface, very steadily and quickly take these images and move on to the next one. This is when we really started to learn about the structures of snowflakes. Being here in Michigan, we've all seen snowflakes before, but probably not quite this close up. It's very unusual to be able to actually see a snowflake where you can identify each of its little radial arms there. So these are really cool and apt for how snowy it's been this past season. Really beautiful. This is a photographer, again, late 1800s, early 1900s. His name is Edward Muybridge. And the saying here is that, well, guess that's not going to happen. Um, there were two men who were arguing with each other and they made a bet. One man believed that when horses ran, there was a point where none of their feet were touching the ground. And the other man disagreed, thinking that at some point each of the legs had to be touching the ground. So they employed Muybridge to come in and take photographs of a running horse, which he did. And so here you can see every single little step of this horse running. He would set up a tripwire to catch the exact second that the kind of movement changed. And then when you layer them together, which was the slide that didn't just play recently, and play them in sequence, you get essentially a moving image. And this is the advent, they didn't know it then, but this would have been the advent of stop motion or like a flip book. Here we have some same thing, tripwires, but the example of um, a fellow doing some gymnastics moves, running to see how the human form changes as we run, and then a bird in flight to also capture the way that the wings move. Before photography, Da Vinci actually did a lot of studies on birds and was able to figure this out, the way that the bird's wings move, without using a camera like this to revisit the way that the physiology of the bird. So incredible that we have these photographs, but Da Vinci had already figured it out. This is a artist named Jamel Shabazz, and he was a commercial photographer by profession, but he also really wanted to document his New York neighborhood in the 80s. And so we just have a lot of portraiture here of everyday people on the street, um, posed, yes, but not out of the ordinary. There's no extra props here, just going about everyday life and really capturing what the fashion was at the time, what the essence was, really just getting the vibe of the neighborhood. Here is a photographer named Diane Arbus. Diane was known to take portraits of people that weren't quite of the normal society. Here you can see this man that is heavily tattooed. I think we are much more familiar with tattoos today than they were then, especially with these facial tattoos. I know we see them a lot on people, especially celebrities now, but back then this would have been really, really unusual. And Diane Arbus stuck to these people and wanted to create their portraits. Here you have parent and their son who was afflicted with gigantism. So he was incredibly tall, as you can see here. Probably, I don't remember his name, but a record of the one of the tallest men to ever exist. She had a fascination with multiples, so twins, triplets, etc. Um, it's said that this image of these two little girls is what inspired the use of the twins in the movie The Shining. Here we have triplets. These are posed again similar to Shabazz, but a little bit more formal. This one is not quite that. The story with this is that this little boy had learned earlier that in the day that his parents were getting divorced. He has a toy grenade in his hand, and the other one is clenched in this kind of insane, I guess, emotion that he can't quite process, but a really interesting photograph. Again, here, some unique looking ladies having quite the fun time, it seems. Here is another one, An Mi Le, and she was Vietnamese and grew up during the wartime. And so she was very into documentation and taking photographs of not war on a political sense to try and be influential one way or the other, but just simple documentation of how war happened. How do they get equipment places? How do they test things? She would also go and photograph war reenactments. Obviously, she would not have been allowed to be in the middle of battle like this. So reenactments were something that she would go and participate in. Here you can see her talking to a reenactment actor. But again, how does war happen? Documenting how these giant tanks are being moved across the sea and coming to these new places. Here is a photographer named Wolfgang Tillmans. He was known to collect different types of images and place them together. He took a lot of images of kind of regular everyday trees or everyday things, excuse me. Here you can see the reflection of a tree in the winter reflected in a coffee cup. He also did a lot of experimentation in the darkroom. So even though this is not an actual photograph in the way that we normally think of it, he was using the same chemical techniques that you would use to develop film in a darkroom. But here he's just experimenting chemically and seeing what will happen. And this was unusual. We didn't see a lot of this at the time. So here again, everyday things. We just have these doggos laying down. Um, Friends, windshield wiper. Again, darkroom experimentation with the chemicals. And these would be pulled prints from the darkroom as well. But really expanding what photography means. Is it actually about the visual or is it about the chemical process? Some everyday things here, and the way that he put images next to each other was really unique and interesting. Here's a photographer named James Van Der Zee. He also really enjoyed photographing people of the elite class in New York. You can see the brownstones there. But something unique that he did is he started to use double exposures. So this would not have been an existing setup here. You can imagine that this woman is attending a funeral for someone that she loves, and then he is there in spirit behind her, embracing her. And the way that Van Der Zee would have done this is to have two different negatives and expose them on one on top of each other. So you have this ghost-like image, literally here appearing somewhat as a ghost, but creating scenes that didn't exist in reality, and bringing a much more psychological sense to the images. Here, a man in a military uniform, and then kind of up there, a memory maybe with that double exposure of his time in service. Here, a young woman that we can only assume is no longer part of this world and would be within that casket that you see in this massive church. And then her image there, a beautiful portrait up in the upper right-hand side. This is an artist that you might want to kind of look at when you do your assignment for later in the week. This is Li Wei, and they're totally known for these wacky, unbelievable images. And if you watch the video that's included in the Moodle page, you'll see that there was actually a lot of planning that went into all of these images. He would employ cranes and different kind of rigging structures, and these people would all be suspended with these wires, and he would have them all come together and really carefully plan the way that these images would be, and then snap the picture, and then in post or the afterwards, he would go in and digitally edit the photos um, to remove all of the kind of support things that are creating this image that is totally unbelievable and fooling in some ways. Um, if you do have some technical Photoshop skills, or you've learned to play around with your phone and you want to make a photo like this for your assignment, by all means, please do. Some really interesting, super strength throwing another human. Here's Cindy Sherman. Cindy Sherman is a very, very well-known American photographer, and her work explores identity, belonging, um, the lens as an observer. So, how do we perceive people from behind a camera? How do people change themselves when they're in front of a camera? And so, all of the images that I'm showing you are all self-portraits of Cindy Sherman that she went in and completely reimagined herself, um, and put on all of these different costumes and wigs. And not only that, like playing with identity and that she's changing the way that she looks and would be uh, people would have an opinion of her. She's changing also the photographic style that she's using. So this is kind of like 40s glam, right? But then this is like horror movie. This is a little more like Twin Peaks, like misty background, moody, um, a little bit more sultry with this one as well. Very like film noir here. Again, this one kind of eerie, like we're at a movie set. But again, this is all self-portraits that she is setting up and dressing for, up to and including things that aren't quite as accessible, things that are a little bit different and exploring how identity can shift and change, up to this clown, interestingly, and then what could be a very wealthy woman, maybe the political leader's wife or something like that. This is a series called by Dulce Pinzon. There's a video about this artist as well on our Moodle page. Sorry, my dog is dogging. And this is all the superheroes and what their like everyday life would be like if they were just regular people that still embodied what they were known for in their series. I am not a huge Marvel follower, so I'm sure you all know who these are by sight. I don't as much, but they're funny, right? So we have Aquaman cleaning fish, um, Catwoman with her family. And now we move on to Gregory Crewston, and this you should be familiar with because we just did our homework assignment for the last week with an image of his. If you were able to do a little bit of research on him, you would have seen that he set up these scenes with meticulous planning, and really wanted them to seem like a still image out of a TV show or some kind of serious drama. A lot of you mentioned that it kind of reminded you the vibes of Stranger Things. I don't know why that just left my brain. But you can very much see almost always there's like backlit, so like light coming from behind the characters. There's almost always like a window from a neighboring house that has the lights on, like people are watching and interacting. But these pose a lot of questions to the viewer. Um, what's going on? What happened before this split second? What's going to happen after this split second? Where are we? What is going on? And as you did with your tabula assignment, take it makes you want to go back and take a second look. and really explore deeper into the image and do some research on what could this possibly be, like what is happening here. I love this. I think this is beautiful. And this is much more, of our time and manipulating the photo, not only with lights that are set up at the scene, but also in post to articulate, um, the lighting and emphasize certain things. So that's just a really quick video for our camera arts. I look forward to seeing all of the images that you all create for your assignment due this weekend and have fun with it. I can't wait to see them.